Hey guys, Sue's here. I am back and finally recovered from the flu. Boy, that was a whammy. Back with another What's for Dinner on Keto, Easy Keto Meal Ideas video. Today's very special as we're doing keto Chinese food. These low-carb Chinese food recipes totally quenched my craving for Chinese food that I've been missing the last year and a half on keto. And if you're into that, please stick around. And while you're at it, please subscribe and join the crew. All right, let's get into it. To start with, I made this awesome Keto General Tso Chicken adapted from ruled ME. To start with, I added 2 tablespoons of Primal Kitchen no sugar added ketchup to a dish, along with a teaspoon of garlic chili sauce, a teaspoon of hoisin sauce, a 1/4 cup chicken broth, 3 tablespoons rice vinegar, 2.5 tablespoons of liquid aminos, 2 tablespoons of granulated swerve, 2 teaspoons of sesame oil, a teaspoon of red chili flakes, a teaspoon of garlic powder, a 1/2 teaspoon of minced ginger, and a 1/4 teaspoon of xanthan gum. Woo! Whisk that all up really well, and then I just sat it to the side while I got started on my chicken. So to start with, I already prepped some chicken breast and just sliced it up into like 1-inch pieces. I took 2 eggs that I just beat together and put those into one little storage bag, and then in another storage bag I added just shy of a cup of crushed pork rinds along with 1/3 cup of almond flour, and just mix that together really well. Then I took my chicken and I'm just gonna dump all of this into the bag with the egg. And then of course I did wash my hands really well before I sealed the bag up and just kind of mixed that all around to make sure all of the chicken was coated with the egg. I did it this way because I'm just too lazy to do it all individually when it's small pieces of chicken like this. Now I transferred the coated chicken to the bag with the almond flour and crushed pork rind mixture, washed my hands again, and did the same thing by mixing that all up. Then over on the stove, over medium-high heat, I took a cast iron skillet and heated about 2 inches of avocado oil. I like using avocado oil because it has a high smoke point. It's perfect for frying. And I just took my coated chicken and put in there, and I cooked it probably just 2 to 3 minutes. I didn't worry about getting the inside all the way done as we are gonna put this in the oven. So I fried all of it and then transferred it to a paper towel lined plates. And then I drained the majority of the oil out, and I also kept any of the crumbles from the pork rind almond flour mixture. Once I had it drained, I added it all back to my pan. I do have my oven preheated at 325. And I'm just gonna pour that sauce we made all over this, and I'm going to bake it in the oven for 1 hour. Now I did check on this every 15 to 20 minutes and just give it a good stir because I really wanted that generous sauce, kind of that caramelized way the sauce sticks on there and gets all nice and sticky. So I made sure to keep coating it, and while that was cooking, I just did some cauliflower rice in the microwave and steamed it up. This is what it looks like when it's plated up. I just topped it with a little bit of green onion. This was so delicious. I think my husband and I are definitely bartering back and forth over who got to eat the rest of it. We'll definitely be making this again. It totally hit the spot if you're craving Chinese takeout and you're following a keto diet. Next up, this is some awesome dim sum shumai. It is like little pork dumplings. These are super duper good. So to start with, I took a head of cabbage, cored it, put it into a big pot into some boiling water, and I'm just gonna let that go to a pretty good boil before I turn it down. I don't want it to boil really hard the whole way, but I do want it to be hot enough that the cabbage leaves can start separating. So I had already removed most of the larger cabbage leaves, and then as it boils, I'm just using a fork to gently separate each of the leaves as they come off, and they'll just come off loose in the pot. Be really careful when you're doing this not to burn yourself, especially when you get closer to the middle of the cabbage. I used 2 forks for that part. And really for this recipe, I should have used a smaller thing of cabbage because you just want to use the smallest leaves off of the cabbage. So as those come off, I just keep separating them and sticking them into another container. And I'm just kind of showing you multiple clips here of that in case you've never done this before and you're curious as to how to do it. While that's finishing up, I went ahead and got started on my pork mixture. So for that, I just added a pound of ground pork, 1.5 tablespoons of grated ginger, an egg white, 1.5 tablespoons of toasted sesame oil, 2 tablespoons of liquid aminos, about a tablespoon to 2 of chopped green onions, a teaspoon of sea salt, and 1/2 teaspoon of pepper. And then I just mix that really well with my hands. And then as you can see, I have my cabbage leaves, and you see I have these really tiny ones. We're going to go smallest to largest. I have my steam pots, just a basic one that's a double boiler. And I'm taking my smallest cabbage leaf first and just putting a little bit of the pork mixture into it, and then I'm just going to stack them into the steam basket. I am going to try to stack them in as close together as possible to help them maintain their shape. And you're just kind of making this like a cup in your hand, and I just put kind of varying amounts of the pork mixture in them, and then you're just going to squeeze it all together, almost like a little wonton. And just keep stacking them in there. And like I said, I did work with the smallest cabbage leaves to the largest ones because I do prefer the small ones the best, but you'll see at the end that I have varying sizes and they all cook just the same and just fine in there. After I have those done, this is what it looks like on the stove in the steam pot. You want enough water so that you don't have to worry about all of the water boiling out, and you don't want it on a heavy boil, but you don't want it on a light simmer, just right. And I steamed them from very start of cold water 40 minutes. While those were steaming, I went ahead and started working on the sauce. So I did 2 tablespoons of liquid aminos, a tablespoon of rice vinegar, a teaspoon of sesame oil, a teaspoon of minced ginger, and I added 1/2 teaspoon of the garlic chili sauce that I like to use, and just whisk that together. And then you can see this is what they look like while they're steaming. You just want to make sure you keep the lid on the whole time. And here they are all plated up. Now they might not be much to look at, but these Keto Dim Sum Shumai were so delicious. They taste just like pot stickers without the carbs. Super duper delicious. We'll be making again. And also, again, this was just like everything I wanted and needed that I've been missing, not being able to have Chinese takeout. Next up, I made this awesome sweet and sour chicken, keto sweet and sour chicken. And again, I'll link these recipes for these last 2 recipes down below. But to start with, I needed to make the sweet and sour sauce. So I took 1/2 cup of granulated swerve, 1/4 cup of brown granulated swerve, 1/2 cup just white distilled vinegar, 1/3 cup unsweetened ketchup. I used the Primal Kitchen one, a tablespoon of liquid aminos, and a heaping teaspoon of minced garlic. And I whisk that together really well. And then I'm just going to stick that to the side while we do our chicken. Now for this recipe, I also prepped about 1 pound to 1.5 pounds of chicken breast ahead of time by just cutting it into 1 to 2 inch pieces. And again, I'm using my cast iron with about 2 inches of avocado oil on the stovetop, medium-high heat. And for this recipe, I'm taking all of my chicken and putting it into an egg mixture. This is just 2 eggs beaten together with 2 tablespoons of unsweetened almond milk and a little bit of salt and pepper. And then in this other tray, I actually just have some whey protein. Now this is just, I think, GNC brand unflavored whey protein. And I'm just taking my chicken and coating it in the egg and then dipping it 1 piece at a time into the protein powder and then dropping it into the hot grease. Now this cooks up and browns really quickly, so you don't really need to cook it for more than 2 to 3 minutes. Again, we're going to put all of this back into the pan later with sauce so you don't really have to be worried about, getting the middle cooked, but these small pieces of chicken fry up so quickly anyway that you don't really have to worry about it. And again, I scooped these out onto just a paper towel lined plate. And I just cooked these in batches. And this is the first time I think of fried chicken with the whey protein coating on it. And I really, really do like the way that it turned out. It does give you almost that tempura, maybe as close as you're going to get on keto, tempura kind of batter to it. Then I just emptied all but about a tablespoon of my oil out of the pan. And I would say this is probably the equivalent of like one large pepper, but I just used what I had in the fridge, which were some mini ones. I was all out of onion somehow, or else I would have probably added that too. But I just left them cut into like 1-inch chunks and missed some of my video clips here. But after I sauteed those about a minute, I poured that sauce that we made on top and started simmering that down to let it thicken. It didn't thicken quite as fast as I would like to, so I did modify the recipe and add about 1/4 teaspoon of xanthan gum to the top of this. And that did the trick right away and thickened it up to that kind of sticky consistency that I would want for sweet and sour sauce. Then I just added all of the chicken that I had fried back to the sauce and stirred that really well. And I probably went ahead and simmered this for another 10 to 15 minutes just to give the sauce a chance to really get on the chicken really well. And steamed some cauliflower rice for this recipe too. And here it is all plated up and topped with a little green onion. This keto sweet and sour chicken was great and is a little different than just, having the sweet and sour chicken, and dipping it. But my husband said he liked this sauce even better than the Chinese takeout sweet and sour sauce. So that was a huge win. And again, I'll be making this recipe again. It was super easy. Next up is an original recipe of mine that I'm still working on for Keto Crab Rangoon. It did turn out really, really tasty, but I will keep, playing around with it till I get it more just how I like it. But to make this, you just take a block of cream cheese, and I took about a 6-ounce can of lump crab meat, added a teaspoon of avocado oil mayo, a tablespoon of chopped green onions. I did 2 teaspoons of Worcestershire, 1 teaspoon of liquid aminos, a teaspoon of lemon juice, a 1/2 teaspoon of granulated swerve, 1/8 teaspoon salt, 1/8 teaspoon pepper, and a teaspoon of minced garlic. And I just took a fork and mixed that together really, really well and stuck it to the side and started making dough by taking a cup of mozzarella cheese, microwaving it for 30 seconds, mixing it, microwaving it again for 30 seconds, mixing it. And to that, I added 3/4 cup of almond flour with a 1/4 teaspoon baking powder and a 1/2 teaspoon sea salt. And I just used my spoon and mixed those dry ingredients in with the cheese pretty well before adding 1 egg. And then I also used my spoon to mix in the egg pretty well before I oiled my hands and got in there and really kneaded the dough to the consistency that I would want. Now, a super awesome tip for working with dough like this, that's mostly cheese and not that much almond flour, is to keep your hands oiled really well. And what I usually do is just stick like a finger bowl beside me with some avocado oil in it, and I will periodically dip my fingers in it and re-oil them to prevent the dough from sticking to me. So then I got a cookie sheet and lined it with some parchment paper. If you've seen me if you saw the appetizer video I just did a couple weeks ago, then you've seen me do this before, but I'm going to separate it out into 12 kind of even balls of dough. And then after that, I re-oiled my hands. And this is, you guys are seeing me make this recipe for the very first time. So I kind of played around with trying to figure out how to make them kind of like crab rangoon. So I just pancaked the dough out, added a little bit of the crab filling. And you can see on this first one, I didn't make the dough part big enough. So it was kind of overflowing. So I just scooped a little bit of it out, back into the bowl, and I'm just folding one end up like a taco and then just pinch the other ends together, so makes a little shape kind of like that. And I just repeated that process over and over again making sure that my hands were oiled really well in between as I pancake that dough out. This one you can see I did thinner and larger, and that worked a lot better for this recipe. I do have my oven preheated to 350. And again, I'm just folding it like a taco on one end, pinching it together, and then kind of doing the same on the other. So it's like a little diamond shaped. There you go. Here are what they all looked like. They're kind of varying sizes. And then I baked those for 20 minutes. Now, I had half of the mixture left over. I could have made another batch of dough, but instead, I decided to add about 1/4 to 1/2 cup of mozzarella cheese to this, mix it up really well, and then I took just a small Pyrex dish and put the rest of the crab mixture in there and topped it with a little bit more mozzarella cheese, and I just baked this whole thing in the oven also for 20 minutes to make a little crab dip. And this is what the Keto Crab Rangoon looked like when it came out. So not as cute as I would like them to look, but they tasted really, really good. I am going to keep tweaking the recipe, though, to get it more like the takeout crab rangoon that I so want. But here it is all plated up with a little liquid aminos to dip it in, and we demolished these really, really quickly. So there you go, guys. That is this week's What's for Dinner on Keto, what to eat on a keto diet if you're doing your keto meal prep for the week. Hope you found this video interesting and that it gave you some awesome keto meal ideas. These are our favorites, some of our favorite keto Chinese food recipes. Please give this video a thumbs up, comment down below, subscribe to our channel. The more people like and comment on the video, the more it gets seen by people trying to follow a keto diet and live a keto lifestyle. Until next week, bye guys.
There's a place I have found in the shade on the ground, far from all worries and troubling sound. When I go there to be by myself, only me, no one can guess what I came